I had a problem with my what I call my main PC, and I ended up going through an upgrade cycle trying to resolve a problem of it just rebooting in the middle of doing things. I ended up replacing just about everything except the case. And it's now stable, but I ended up with a bunch of what I call scrap parts. They were parts, they were okay, but there were some problems that I'd had in the past, and they were not, shall we say, cutting edge. So I put together a video about taking these scrap parts and building a new PC. Sort of. It's a rebuilt PC with mainly scrap parts and a few new ones, and I'll cover what's new and what's existing. So this is my motherboard that I had. This is a Gigabyte GA 770 TA UD3 motherboard. You notice that there's only one slot for graphics card that actually has connectors for floppy drives and IDE drives. This is an older motherboard. It only supports 4 sticks of RAM. There are some other issues with the layout. I'll talk about it as we go through with this. After the build, I also had 4 sticks of DDR3 RAM. So this is the RAM that I had laying around. I scavenged this from an old Alienware laptop that I had. Yes, this is a laptop drive. It's a 7200 RPM SATA 100 gigabyte drive. Not a bad little drive. Was in an Alienware, so you know that it actually had at the time a very good performance. Today, I would probably go with a solid state drive, and as you can see on there, it says December '05. So this drive is 10 years old, but when I first got it, it was very fast. Today, it's an okay. Even today, it's not too bad of a drive for sitting around. I upgraded my graphics card from a GeForce GTX 570 to a 960. And this is a reasonable graphics card. For the stuff that I do, I am not a cutting edge gamer, but it was a decent graphics card that I had just sitting, as the saying goes, gathering dust. Here is an old, I'll say somewhat nasty power supply. Why do I say nasty power supply? Because it is not modular. After working with a modular power supply, I wouldn't want to go back to one like this with this huge cable harness sticking out of it that comes out, and it's hard to manage the cables and it's cumbersome to deal with. The power supply is actually a VIOTEK 700 watts, so it's got a reasonable rating on wattage. Like I said, this is not new. This I've had for a while. From my recent upgrade, I also had a 120 millimeter fan left over, and I actually had some 90 millimeter and 80 millimeter fans, and if I'd have found them, I'd have put the 80 millimeter fans in the case that I bought, but I didn't find them until after I'd put everything together. This motherboard that I've listed here and this graphics card I've had for a while, and I initially had some cooling problems, and that's why I bought a Coolmaster case initially for it, which solved the cooling problems. So I wanted to put another fan in this case just in case. This is the case that I bought. It's a half XB Evo called the LAN box. It's a nice case, and I'll talk more about what I like and the one or two minor things I dislike. So here is the unboxing of the case. As you see, the case, it comes nicely, neatly packaged. This is a picture from the front. You see that there are two 5¼ inch bays and two hot swappable drive bays. This is a picture from the top. So you've got ventilation on the top. You could actually put a big fan on the top, but I'm just going to leave it like that. Here's the picture from the back. And you can see that there's a spot for the 120 millimeter fan up in the top left, and you can put two 80 millimeter fans in the bottom right. And then on the bottom left is the place for the power supply, and you can see the filter that fits on the bottom. So after removing the top, this is what the case looks like. The sides also come off, so you can remove 3 sides of the case, which make it really easy to work in. The standard parts that you find with a case, you've got some restrained, some tie wraps, a bunch of bolts and screws and such. These are the ears in the center are the ears for mounting drives. That's why I call them, I don't know, they're the little mounting brackets. And then you got a mounting bracket for putting a 2.5 inch drive in a 3.5 inch bay. Here is the motherboard tray. I like this. I really like the way that this motherboard comes out. The tray comes out so you can actually work on the motherboard without getting in there. I always had a problem getting into the case, and I like the motherboard tray where you can install and work on the motherboard and then put the whole thing back in the box and bolt it in. Here is the case after I pulled out the motherboard. So you see it's nice and roomy. You can see where I've taken the side panels off. And so you've got a lot of freedom to get in there and do things. To the top left is the support for the 2 3.5 inch drives that are hot swappable. To the top right are the 2 5.25 inch bays. The bottom right is where you put in it's called the SATA or cage, not SATA, SSD cage. You can put 3 3.5 inch drives there. And then on the bottom left is where you put the power supply, and there is a filter, like I said, on the filter on the bottom. This is the picture from the back. And when I took this picture and I looked at it and I go, oh, that reminds me of in Star Wars when the Millennium Falcon is being drug into the Death Star, and it's the bay there for the putting in the Millennium Falcon on the Death Star. That's what it reminds me. The power supply sticks out a little bit, is the way it mounts, and this bracket comes on here. You see the thumb screws, and the one complaint I had about this case were the thumb screws were really, really tight. I'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. So pulling back plate off the case and putting it on the power supply, you can see the power supply there. Then I mounted the 120 millimeter fan on the back. When I first mounted it, I needed to eventually rotate it to get a little bit better cable management, but it didn't think about that when I first put it in there. This is taking the 100 gigabyte drive and mounting it on the little drive caddy for putting the 2.5 inch drive in a 3.5 inch bay. And this is the same thing turned around with the little ears on it. And this is sliding the case into the case. It fits in from the side, which is interesting because most things are from the front, but this is from the side, but the whole side panel comes off. So it slides in the side and it just fits in there nicely. Put it in the middle. What isn't on the picture here was when I first put it in, I go, oh, I need to connect up power and such. So you actually want to connect up the power and the SATA cable to it. And that's when I realized I did need one other little piece. When I first started this, I actually found it. I have a copy. It's the Molex to SATA cable, which I'll show in a minute here. This is putting the drive in. And well, I needed one of these. My old power supply only had connectors for 2 SATA drives, and I was going to put 4 SATA drives in this box, so I needed to convert one of the Molex connectors into a SATA drive, into SATA. So here's the motherboard sitting on the tray. And this is where I find that my motherboard was possibly a little non-standard. I'm not sure. As you see, the mounting holes are a little strange. They don't line up with what's on the motherboard connector for the last row of supports, which is okay because I'd always just use 6 screws, not the full 9 anyway, to mount this motherboard. But I thought, oh, okay, we'll put in here. So you get the little nuts. They were also very tight. Had to get out pliers to tighten those in there, because for some reason that just about this case, everything about it seemed like that the threading on some of the screws was there, but some of the holes was there, but it just wasn't as clean or as whatever. It was very difficult for the screws and the thumb screws. So this was the easiest installation of RAM I think I've ever done, because the motherboard is out and mounted in the tray, and you can put you got the tray sitting on the table, and you just put the RAM in, because nothing, you don't have to reach in or do anything like that. That was really nice. I really like that about this case. I ordered this LG Blu-ray burner, and I had another one just like this one that I'd bought in what I call my main system. So I bought another one, and this is how it basically came. This was inside a single cardboard box container thing. No bubble wrap, no box, no padding of any form. Just this inside a very tight cardboard case shipped off. It works, it's fine, there are no dents, but I was sort of expecting at least some bubble wrap or some protection when it was shipped. So this is sliding the drive in. There's a little lever on the inside to help you lock it, so you don't need to put any screws. It just slides in. You just got to connect up the SATA cables to it. So this was the big expense of this build, and these were the two 3 terabyte drives. And this is the unboxing of the two 3 terabyte drives. The front has 2 hot swappable bays, and you pop them open, and out slides this tray. So this is the picture of the opening the case and sliding the tray out. There is the tray, and there is the drive. The drive fits inside the tray. No screws, just to push button things in. That's on I've seen on all the Cool Masters that I've dealt with. And then you slide the drives back in, and there's no connecting cables because you connect it to the mounting inside. They're designed to be hot swappable. So here's with the motherboard on the motherboard tray put back into the case. I needed to get a network card. Actually found I had an old nasty network card, and I'll say nasty because I don't think they could have ever got drivers for Windows 8 for this thing, for that card. So I bought a new card. Here is the case with everything in it. And you'll see there's not very good cable management. I've done some minor cable management with this. One of the things that I dislike about this motherboard, and either I've got to get another extension cord or something. You see the cord going across the center of the motherboard to connect to the audio, and the cord is just barely long enough to reach the front, but the connector is on the front of the motherboard, and you normally want to get to the back, and okay, so there's some issues there. And that one's really bad, and I haven't cleaned up. But this is where I put everything together, and it was good enough to plug in and see if it powered up. And it powered up first time. No problems. So there it is running. You see the power light on. You don't see, when I try to take this picture, I try to take it with showing the drive light, but it just didn't come out. But there is the assembled and running box. So the scrap parts I had was a Gigabyte GA 770 TA UD3 motherboard. and I had an AMD Phenom II 965 at 3.4 gigahertz. That's a 4-core processor. I had 8 gigabytes of DDR3 Kingston RAM, and I had Hitachi 100 gigabyte 72 RPM SATA, and I had an EVGA GTX 570, a VIOTEK 700 watt power supply, a Coolmaster 120 millimeter fan, and some, who knows what brand, Molex to SATA power adapter. So I had all those parts sitting. That's why I decided to build a new system. What I needed was a case. I actually had a case, but I'd had I'd had heat problems with that case before, so I didn't want to use that case, so I bought a new case. Then I bought a Blu-ray burner, and I know there are cheaper ones, but I bought this one because I've got one just like it. And then the real expense of the build was the 3 terabyte 7200 RPM hard drives. That works out to be about $136 of the cost. I mean, $326 of the cost of the upgrade of the build, and I needed a network card. So my total cost here is $505.80. But there was one thing I'm still missing, which I've got to order, which is it's a 20-pin USB 3 male cable to a USB 2.0 9-pin motherboard female. It costs another $6.60 because the motherboard I had is so old that they hadn't defined the USB 3.0 20-pin connector, so I just have that. I have two USB plugs on the front of the case that right now are disconnected, and I just need this $4.60 cable to connect that up. But my total cost is $510.40. But the real cost was mainly of the hard drives. This was an amazingly easy build. Comparatively the only thing that I really disliked about the case was the thumb screws. And maybe it's just that I hadn't dealt with them. When I have another Coolmaster case, it's a 922, and thumb screws come out real easy everywhere. And I was expecting that with this one, but the thumb screws were really hard to get out, and I worried that I think I may have stripped one of them because it was just so hard getting the thumb screw out and then getting the thumb screw back in. So that was a tiny bit worrying. Other than that, I like the case, and most of those thumb screws I probably won't have to get into, but they're not really thumb screws. A lot of them you really have to use a screwdriver because you can't get in and grab them. At least I can't, because there's something in the way to make it so it's really hard to turn them, and some of them are really tight. If you like my video, press the thumbs up button. I'd appreciate that. Or if this interests you, you can always subscribe to my channel. There's a button right above. I look forward to hearing some comments. Tell me what you think about this, and I'll try and reply, and we can see if I'll do some more of these. Thank you.